Winning the Discussion with Liberals. After 40 years of animated discussions with liberals, I have designed an approach that will enable you to win the discussion with liberals. However, since many of you may not have time to read my book, Less Government, More Future, which makes an irrefutable case for unleashing economic freedom, I have prepared this 15-minute presentation covering some of the highlights of my approach. I guarantee that armed with this knowledge, you will make more progress than you have ever made in discussions with liberals. In this presentation, I will briefly cover three areas. First, I will present the correct representation of the political spectrum. Then I will show where economic freedom and economic vitality are on this spectrum. And finally, I will show how our founders positioned us for maximum freedom and economic vitality. Let's begin with the political spectrum. If asked to construct the political spectrum, few Americans would get it right. Most would respond with some vague notion of communism and socialism on the left, dictatorships on the right, and democracy in the middle as shown here. The problem with this depiction is that it is simply a sprinkling of various forms of governments along a bar with no graduated concept at its base. Furthermore, the extremes of the spectrum should be completely different from one another, yet both are totalitarian. Finally, anarchy does not even appear on this spectrum. Therefore, no meaningful information is conveyed by this depiction. Throughout history, the core of differences between left and right has centered on the size and power of government. Those on the right favor less government and free market solutions. Hence, moving right, governments decrease in size and power. Those on the left favor more government and governmental solutions. Hence, moving left, governments grow in size and power. At the extreme far right, there is essentially no government, or a government so small and emasculated that the result is anarchy. Just a step or two inside of anarchy, there is fertile soil for democracies and free republics which are founded upon the principle of limited government. These are governments that are limited to defending the nation, enforcing the laws, facilitating commerce, regulating as necessary to protect freedoms, caring for the truly needy, and delivering the mail. Moving left towards the center and beyond, the role of governments in these democracies and free republics progressively expands to encompass hefty entitlement programs and develop a more active regulatory stature, eventually transforming them into socialistic nations. As the leftward drift continues, the size and power of government increases until ultimately, on the far left, government is omnipotent and all-controlling, as in communistic and totalitarian regimes. All totalitarian regimes are far left, including communism, fascism, Nazism, monarchies, dictatorships, and oligarchies. Since they need force and intimidation to retain control, they require large size and power of government. They cannot possibly exist on the right. It is impossible to incrementally reduce the size and power of government moving right and result in a government powerful enough to rule in a dictatorial fashion. So the political spectrum is based on size and power of government, which increases moving left. But where are economic freedoms and economic vitality? First, where is freedom on the political spectrum? On the extreme far right, in a state of anarchy, citizens cannot go about their daily lives with the assurance that laws will be enforced for their safety, that business contracts will be upheld in court, and that the nation will be defended. Hence, in anarchy, there is no real freedom. On the extreme far left, there is total government that can invade and control all aspects of business and personal lives. On any given day, government can seize control of businesses, homes, and can even imprison its citizens on whims of trumped-up charges. Hence, there is essentially no freedom on the extreme far left. If there is no freedom on either the extreme left or right, then where is freedom? Freedom is the opposite of oppression. Only government has the power to oppress on a national basis and does so with every expansion of government, from regulation to social programs. Maximum freedom must, therefore, occur where government is smallest, but not so small that anarchy exists. In other words, taking a step or two in from the far right to the point of limited but effective government is the point at which both personal and economic freedoms are maximized. If we were to graph the size and power of government versus freedom, it would look like this. At point A, in a state of anarchy, there is no freedom. Point B is limited government, where freedoms are maximized. From point B to point C on the far left, each additional step left further erodes freedom as the size and power of government increases and citizens relinquish freedoms to government. As Thomas Jefferson noted, the natural progress of things is for liberty to yield and government to gain ground. This is a clear statement that our founders recognized the inverse relationship between size and power of government and our freedoms. When government gains, we lose freedom. All governments move left over time. Therefore, keeping government on a short constitutional leash is the essence of retaining freedoms and economic vitality. Economic freedom is generally construed as those freedoms which impact economic activity. The Heritage Foundation and the Wall Street Journal together evaluate approximately 180 countries each year against their Index of Economic Freedom, which comprehensively measures 10 components of marketplace freedom. Here are the top 10 for 2012. The thriving emporiums of Hong Kong and Singapore are perennially ranked first and second. At number 10, the United States has slipped 3 places in the past 3 years and is now no longer even the most economically free nation in North America, and is actually only the 3rd freest nation in the Western Hemisphere. The results from these evaluations establish a clear relationship between economic freedom and economic vitality. The benefits of economic freedom are nothing short of amazing. Viewing the Index of Economic Freedom rankings of 180 countries in quartiles, the average per capita GDP for nations in the top quarter is nearly 10 times that of those in the bottom quarter. Average per capita income is 10 times that of the bottom quarter. Average gross domestic product GDP rate of growth is 3 times higher. Life expectancy is 20 years greater, 79 versus 59 years. Life satisfaction scored 63% higher. Corruption scored 3 times lower in the top quartile. Overall, economically free economies enjoy substantially lower unemployment rates than their less free counterparts and dramatically higher standards of living. Hence, a graph of economic vitality versus the size and power of government is nearly identical to the graph of freedom versus the size and power of government, as shown here. Maximum economic vitality is at point B, limited government. Moving left from point B, as government expands, economic vitality diminishes. From any point on the political spectrum between B and C, which is where all established governments reside, a step to the left has mostly negative economic consequences, as more social spending or regulation negatively impacts economic vitality, requiring even more social spending, placing the nation in an economically descending spiral. Moving to the right between points B and C has the exact opposite effect. When the size of government is reduced, economic vitality increases, requiring even less government spending, which again improves economic vitality. Hence, moving to the right places the nation in an economically ascending spiral and a future of opportunity, higher living standards, and world economic leadership. So maximum freedom and economic vitality is with limited government on the far right. As we will now see, our founders clearly understood the advantages of economic freedom and far-right positioning. In 1781, our first constitution, known as the Articles of Confederation, was ratified. The Articles failed because the states were willing to yield responsibilities but not authority to the federal government. Hence, the federal government had no means of enforcing its laws, nor could it tax or regulate interstate commerce. Each state had its own monetary system, so the federal government could not even devise a single system for the nation. Congress could not maintain an army or navy if states refused to pay for it, nor could it pay off its Revolutionary War debts. In essence, since the federal government was too weak to enforce the Constitution, we had anarchy at the federal level. Our founders had placed us as far right as possible. Next, in 1787, our present Constitution was adopted and finally ratified by all states in 1791. The states now understood that in order to enjoy freedom, they must surrender some freedoms. Even so, our founders were so concerned that they might have created a monster that would move left over time, devouring our freedoms, that they went to great lengths to limit government and the extent to which it could move left. First, Article 1, Section 8 specifically details what Congress is permitted to do. Anything not specifically authorized is prohibited. Second, they incorporated the Bill of Rights, 10 amendments designed to preserve our liberties and protect us from government. Notably, the 10th Amendment reserves all powers not specifically allocated to the federal government for the states and the people. Third, Article 5 specifically calls for 3/4 of state legislatures to approve an amendment, making it as difficult as possible to change the Constitution and expand the federal government. Hence, our founders finally succeeded in placing us on the far right in limited but effective government where freedom and economic vitality are maximized. Like the ancient Roman Republic formed in 510 BC, whose far-right positioning created an economic powerhouse that spawned the greatest empire of all time, America quickly rose to world power status and later became the world's leading economic power. Europe was shocked that within 1 century after its birth, the United States had risen to parity with the great European powers, the masters of the universe. Remember, prior to this, European nations had collectively conquered the world, and quite easily at that. Yet from out of nowhere, in just 1 century, one of their colonies had risen to challenge them as a world power. Why did not Mexico, Argentina, Brazil, Chile, or any of the other New World countries surge to world power status? Quite simply, they were all left of center. They had dictatorships and oligarchies which suppressed freedoms and therefore economic vitality. There is no way that a nation on the left can compete with one on the right economically, all else being equal. Unfortunately, the astronomical advantage our founders gave America over the rest of the world with far-right positioning was not to last. The European liberal progressive movement found its way to America at the beginning of the 20th century and initiated what has since been a century-long drift to the left for America. Big government was unleashed, creating the massive social and regulatory programs that would eventually draw America into a long-term, economically descending spiral, resulting in the financial chaos we now witness. The only real solution to our present economic woes is to move America right, back to less government and more economic freedom and vitality. So we have seen that the political spectrum is based on size and power of government, which increases with leftward drift. Economic freedom is to the right on the political spectrum towards less government. The benefits of economic freedom have been proven to be enormous and all-encompassing. Our founders positioned us on the far right for maximum economic freedom and economic vitality, but that advantage has eroded with our progression left. Obviously, my book, Less Government, More Future, covers much more ground than I could in this brief presentation, such as how the degradation of economic freedoms was a major factor in the fall of Rome, how out-of-control spending for decades has created an American government that is twice its optimal size, with 1/2 of the economic growth rate it would otherwise have, how Ronald Reagan created 25 years of economic expansion by unleashing economic freedoms, the 2008 financial crisis, and the rise of China. However, armed with what you now know about the political spectrum, economic freedom, and our far-right positioning, you are well prepared to win the discussion with liberals. If you desire to expand on this beginning, read my book or view my blog regularly at moveamericaright.com. Thank you.